My name is Dr. John Griffin, and it is my great pleasure to introduce you to the session today on preventing authentication bypass, a tale of two researchers that will be presented by three researchers, Ravi Jaiswal, Terry Zhang, and Ron Chan. Please help me in welcoming these gentlemen to the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today, we are here to tell you a story of collaboration between two researchers and Microsoft on how they found a critical vulnerability in Outlook web app. And this is also a story about close and collaboration which spanned continents to help protect the customers and their data. So in this story, we have following characters. First, we have Terry Zhang, who is co-founder of Tofant and a specialist in breaking identity, who was working independently of Ron Chan, an independent security researcher who was concurrently with Terry investigating an issue in Outlook web app. As you all know, Outlook web app, or OWA, is a mail service created by Microsoft, and it has billions of users all over the world. I'm Ravi Jaiswal, an engineering manager in Outlook web app, and with primary focus on authentication and security. So this story starts with a discovery, and to talk more about it, here is Terry.
Thank you, Ravi. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm Terry, and I'm so glad to be here on HackerOne stage to share some ideas about how I found this critical issue on Microsoft, specifically on Outlook service, and also about how I escalate these issues step by step to make it even more critical. Okay, let's get it. So the first discovery was sometime before March 24th this year, and one day I found there's a new option, a new switch on Outlook Enterprise Service that supports that user to switch to the new UI. So after I switched to the new UI, I used Browser to intercept the request, and I found there's a new option, new API endpoint that I never seen before, and it had a action called get access token for resource. That sounds pretty interesting. It might doing some kind of token exchange or session exchange work. And it turns out, indeed, this endpoint will return a JSON web token that is unsigned. So we can see in this screenshot that the algorithm part is none. And we got a lot of information, a lot of data in the payload part, which we will get to it in a few slides later. And later I found this token was only used by the application itself to access some kind of internal preview APIs, like product tips, like what's new, like status check, some kind of, will return some kind of useless data. So, but I just have this feeling that I think this token can do much more than this. So I note it down and move forward. And then I came across this official RESTful API on Outlook. And normally to use this RESTful API, a third-party client or applications need to be registered on Azure Cloud, and then let user go through an OIDC flow or OpenID Connect flow to get users authorization to grant it for some certain permissions on this application. So that this application can retrieve a JSON web token, and that token is definitely signed. So those two screenshots, one is the unsigned token from the internal API endpoints, and one is the signed token we got from the OIDC flow. So, and also those tokens just in totally different data structure. So it's kind of irrelevant at the first time, totally irrelevant. But why not give it a try? So I just placed these set this unsigned token to the authorization header and send a request to one of the basic RESTful API. And then suddenly the server side just returned that user's profile back. So that means the Outlook server side was happy to consume our unsigned token and return that user's profile back. So this is awesome. Like, I just have this feeling or confidence like I can find something from it. So before we move on, let's take a look at some key details of the token. And there is a OID, which refers to current user's UID or user ID. And there's SMTP, which refers to current user's email address. And there's scoop, which refers to current permission scoop that granted for this token. As we can see, there's full access as exchange, which means that this token got full permission scoop granted. And there's another actor token that is also another JSON Web Token. And this token is signed. And this token contains current tenant info, current tenant ID. So there's another TID which refers to the tenant ID either. So we got some key details of the token. So the very first thing I've tried is to change the OID to another user's that's under the same tenant. So that user's profile just returned right back. So that means I found the authentication bypass on Outlook enterprise service that I can fully control any other user's account that under the same tenant. Yeah, because I can do whatever I want. Basically, I can do whatever I want, like just as far as the RESTful API supports, which the RESTful API is pretty powerful. So, but there is a limitation in this case that, as I mentioned before, there was actor token, which is signed and contain current tenant ID. So we can't change that. We can't modify that because it is signed. So we can only exploit this issue under the same tenant for enterprise. And then I remind consumer Outlook. So what about consumer Outlook? So basically, consumer Outlook service is the same as enterprise, just running on different domain. Like for enterprise, it's running on outlook.office.com, and for personal, it's running on outlook.live.com or mail.live.com. And both services support this special endpoint, get access token for resource. And also there is an interesting thing that I've learned from consumer Outlook service in that after I comparing two JSON Web Token, unsigned JSON Web Token that is from two of my personal test accounts, and I learned that all personal Outlook accounts share the same tenant ID. So that means no matter you use live.com or like outlook.com or hotmail.com, your accounts are under the same tenant. So that's wonderful because in this case, we can modify the tenant ID. And now we don't have to because all that personal accounts use the same tenant. So quickly, I changed the OID to another personal account, and that user's profile just returned back. And then there's still a little issue need to be cleared out. Like I can't find an easy way to get any other user's OID. Like it is in UUID format, and it's kind of impossible to enumerate or to brute force. But like I need to know any other's OID. So I started to play around with this token, and again, finally, I managed to find a way to only use any other user's email address, just email address, no user ID, no OID, no user ID to exploit this issue that can affect on any other personal accounts. So I made a demo video for this so that it can demonstrate the critical impact. So we found the same endpoint on Outlook, on consumer Outlook service, get access token for resource, and then we got a returned a JSON Web Token that is unsigned. And then let's take a look at this token. We can see the algorithm part is none, and we got a lot of information. And the TID down here will always be this value between different personal accounts. So then we place this token to the authorization header and send to one of the basic API endpoint, official API endpoint, and that user's profile just return back. And then we do some modification. We change the OID to null, and we change the PUID to empty string, and the same with the CUID to empty string, and then somehow magic happened. Now the server side will only use the SMTP value, which is the user's identity, which is the user's email address as user's identity to return that user's data back. So that is make this issue just more straight and no requirement and no user interaction at all. So we can see we can not just only get their profile back, we can just read their email contents, and we can do a lot more. Just a lot of all the things that the official API supports, we can do it on behalf of that targeted user. So in this video, I just also demonstrate like how I can read or write on behalf of you. So just use your email address, no other requirements. And this will show like I can send email on your behalf without disturb you. So okay, I think so far this demo video has already made a good point for its critical impact. So I'll just move on. Okay, so this is the final result. Like first, I found an authentication bypass on Outlook Enterprise Service, and to make it even more critical, I finally escalate this issue from Enterprise within the same tenant to that it can affect all personal Outlook accounts, no matter you use live.com, hotmail.com, or outlook.com. And finally, I managed to find a way that only use the email address, no other requirements, and no user interaction at all. So after that, I quickly wrote a report and sent to MSRC, and then I just lay back and started to imagine my bounty ring, because I'm pretty sure this is a critical issue. So, and it turns out that I'm not the only one who found it. So I passed to Ron for his second discovery. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Terry. I'm Ron Chen. I'm currently working as a security analyst in NTT. And this story starts a few months ago. Back in April this year, I saw a retweet from Microsoft Security Response Twitter. It said, hey, we have better bounties now, we have quicker bounties now, and we now pay through HackerOne. As I'm familiar with HackerOne platform, so I thought to myself, why not take a look? So I did what most bug hunters would do. I used Burp Suite to have a look at the Outlook web. And I tried many things. I tried to look for XSS, SQL injection, CSRF, and most of them are gone, I think. I could not find anything until I got lucky by seeing these two highlighted requests. These two requests are highlighted because I previously installed a plugin called JSON Web Token Attacker plugin. And what it does is it will automatically highlight anything that has a JWT header in the request. So this time, I got lucky by noticing that these two requests are highlighted because they got JWT header in the request. And the reason I chose to install this plugin is that whenever we see a JWT header, we have to look for its signature and algorithm. If the algorithm is none, then it means that we can do something with this JWT token and impersonate other user depending on the scenario. So let's have a look at this JWT token that Outlook was using at that moment. At the first sight, it seems that this is just another JWT sending a request to an API endpoint that has no use to me. It seems that this is just searching for something, and I don't know what it does, to be honest. But then I used that plugin to take a closer look to the JWT header, payload, and the signature parts. And this is the first screenshot of the JWT. In this screenshot, I used the JSON Web Token attacker for this attack. And if you have paid attention for Terry's slides, you should notice that for this slide, for this screenshot that I'm having now, the algorithm is RS256. But in Terry's screenshot, it says algorithm is none. It is because at the moment of the discovery, I forgot to take a screenshot. So I took this screenshot after I know that I have to prepare for this talk. So this is why the screenshot is like this. But just imagine the algorithm here should be none, okay? So this is the next payload. The payload of this JWT is nothing special again, but something special about this is that it got mail read write permission. So this is very powerful JWT. And finally, we can see that in the base64 signature part of this JWT, it has nothing. It means that this JWT is unsigned. And I quickly thought to myself, here's what I'm going to do. First, I need to figure out what parameter that the API uses to identify Ron is Ron in this JWT token. And then I will change that parameter to impersonate other users. And finally, after changing the parameter, I will apply this JWT token to as many endpoints as possible to see what can I do with this JWT token. And I tried many stuff, and only one parameter works. It is the OID parameter. But how do we get OID of other users? Since, as you can see in this screenshot, it is highlighted in red. It is a long digit UUID that no one can brute force, and you cannot enumerate that. So naturally, as a bug hunter, we have to read a lot of documentation. So I consulted the API documentation from Microsoft and see, hey, is there a way for me to retrieve OID of other people? And then it turns out there is an exact endpoint that you can query, and then it will return their OID to you without any user interaction. So it means that now with this JWT, I can get other people's OID without their interaction. So my next plan is to substitute their OID into my JWT token. And then the final step is using this updated JWT token to query the mail reading API endpoints and see if I can read their email. And of course, I did. I can read anyone's email using this technique as long as they are inside the same tenant. It means that if you guys are inside the same organization, then you can use this to read anyone that works for this company as well. To conclude, first, I saw a retweet from Microsoft, and then I took a look at Outlook, and then I discovered that I can get an unsigned JWT, and then I can use the same JWT to get another person's OID, and then I will replace that person's OID in my JWT that I got from Microsoft. And then at this point, I'm impersonating that person. So now the final step is I will send it to the mail service, and then I can read and write on behalf of any user using this technique if they are in the same organization. At this point, I stopped every testing because I think this is good enough for the impact. So I contacted Microsoft Security, and then and then now I will pass to Ravi to complete the rest of the story. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry and Ron. So let's talk about the response from Microsoft that followed these reports. So as Terry mentioned, sometime on March 24th, Microsoft Security Response Center received the case from Terry, which was then triaged and then cased for remediation. So Outlook Web App team at this time started looking for fixes and mitigations without impacting major functionality in Outlook because it was a critical API. Soon, a few days later, Ron's report followed, and since this was a second discovery of the same vulnerability in few days' time, Microsoft Security Response Center declared SERP. SERP is a process that Microsoft follows to handle elevated attacks on customers. So as a result, Microsoft or Outlook Web App team started looking for fixes, which accelerated fixes and mitigations. So at this point of time, what we were thinking is we have to stop this as soon as possible, even if with trade-offs of loss of some functionality, because you don't know how it could be exploited. So in a couple of days time, Microsoft over team rolled out a mitigation and turned off get access token for resource API, which immediately stopped the clients from getting a partially signed access token. This also meant there was a trade-off that, and I'll talk about more in the details. So let's go dig a bit more in the details of the mitigation. So as you can see, we have OA client, which is running in the browser on the user's computer, and it talks to OA service endpoint, which is the primary endpoint wherein OA client talks to. And like all web apps, it uses cookie-based authentication to talk to the OA service endpoint. However, OA client also talks to a common Outlook REST endpoint for some common Outlook-wide functionalities like search and other miscellaneous options. And this endpoint does not support cookie-based auth, and it works on header-based authentication. So in order to get the token, OA client makes a get access token resource for API call to the server. The server then used to mint a partially signed token and return it to the client, which is the token that Terry and Ron showed you earlier. The client would then make the call using this token to the Outlook REST endpoint and to perform user actions. So, so to mitigate it, we immediately turned off a flight or a switch, as we call it, to stop get access token API from returning any kind of access these partially signed token to the client, which also meant all the calls to Outlook REST endpoint would fail, especially search. And search, since it's very, very critical for any meaningful OA experience, OA team rerouted search back to the Outlook endpoint, which was not optimal, but it made the client work nonetheless. There were some minor functionality losses, but we were okay with at this stage. But the most important thing at this point of time was this issue could not be exploited anymore. And in backend and in parallel, OA team also was working on a full fix so that when we enable get access token for API, the client could not get a partially signed token and instead get a fully signed user permission tokens. And it is important to note that because of SERP and the incident response that Microsoft was following, OA team was never scrambling ever for like what should we do and things like that. There was a proper communication and coordination between the teams, which greatly helped in mitigating the issue very quickly. So let's go a bit more into details of the fix that we made. So as in the previous case, our client would still talk to our service endpoint using cookie-based authentication, and it would still make the call to get access token API to get the token. Here, instead of using a library in process to mint a token, our service would then call token service to get the token. So token service was an existing service that we have and which is protected by and controlled by a configuration for each of the app and the scenario. So these configurations are onboarded when new scenarios are written, and these policies are applied at runtime whenever a token is requested for that scenario. So once our service endpoint gets that token, and in this case a user level permission token, it then calls the Outlook REST endpoint with that new user permission token. The search was rerouted back, and all the functionalities that were disabled were enabled again, and the service was back running in the normal state as it was before. The same day, Microsoft Security Response Center also confirmed with Terry and Ron that they were not able to reproduce the issue anymore, and also confirmed with them that we would be paying bug bounties. And Microsoft elected to increase the bounty amount considering the severity of the issue as well as the impact that it had, and the high quality of reports that were submitted to us. We thank both of you a lot for this partnership in keeping the customers protected. So the outcome of this story is what you would hope for. The researchers reported an issue to Microsoft, and Microsoft quickly responded by mitigating the issue and turning off the affected call path, followed soon by a comprehensive fix which mitigated the issue, which fixed the issue actually, and returned the service to the normal state. The researchers were paid bounty rewards for their partnership, and customers were protected. So in the final part of the story, we would like to share some of the learnings that we derived from this incident, and some of which can be applied to other developers and cloud service providers as well. So from the developer's perspective, it is very, very important that we follow the principle of least privilege. And we can achieve this by promoting resource scoped and one-time tokens. This was the biggest learning that we derived from here, and it helps greatly in improving the security and helps minimizing the attack surface. Secondly, while it is very, very important to adopt newer tools and technologies and adopt newer flows in terms of security, it is equally important to support and to drive and deprecate to drive end support for legacy token types and systems. So this not only will help you in reducing the attack surface, but also in general, as a general good software practice, will reduce your overhead in terms of maintenance, as well as biggest thing is it will reduce your overhead of maintenance. So, and thirdly, it's very important to have security policies in place for token issuance, because with the rise of microservices based architecture, the usage of service to service tokens and client to service tokens have increased dramatically. There are so many services and you need so many tokens to talk to different services. So having policies in place and having configuration and having this decided that the scenario onboarding time of what kind of tokens are needed and what kind of tokens are issued, and enforcing those policies at runtime, it's very, very important. And it's always a good idea to have a common team which manages this policy. Because as developers, we always try to choose the most straightforward path to implement the feature and like get it out to the users. And this straightforward path might not be the most secure path. Having a common team also helps us, reducing the so that helps us make feature teams not aware of the complexities of authentications and token handling and things like that, which is also one more area where things can go wrong. So from the cloud service provider's perspective, it's very critical to have your incident response process ready and in place. So all the teams normally have a process wherein when they receive a report or a bug or issue, they try to remediate it, they work on a fix, and then they deploy the fix worldwide to solve the problem. However, there are scenarios where a standard process is not enough. You need an accelerated process in cases like this, where you need to immediately do something to stop things from going bad to worse. And so whenever any issue arises, the team should decide, should they follow a standard process to mitigate it, or should they follow an accelerated process. In an accelerated process, the team should look to mitigate the issue as soon as possible, even if it means there might be some functionality loss here and there. And that is a judgment call that team needs to make. And in parallel, that there should be dedicated engineers who work on long-term correct fix that needs to be made. And the last part is then deploying those fix to all the servers in the world to restore the state. So if you have a few servers, then it's okay. But if you are working with servers on the order of hundreds of thousands, that having that process in place helps. And having the incident response plan also helps in terms of communication and collaboration between the teams in finding other issues that might be affected because and finding other similar issues. So incident response plan is very, very important. Secondly, review your scenarios not only during the design time, but also periodically as part of periodic scenario audits. Because at the design time, it might pass the security review and everything looks good. But over a period of time, as we all know, things change and the systems change, and what was intended initially might not be how it is running right now. So periodic audit helps a lot in that area. Third is always keep learning from your past reports and bugs, as well as leading industry and following good industry practices to improve the security flow of your systems. And lastly, but very important, is to partner with the security community to find flaws. Every team or normally a company can have internal security researchers and teams to find issues in their system, but it is also equally important to partner with the community so that both complement each other and find the problems. And if someone finds a problem or an issue, you should have a way, or they should know that these security researchers know how to report this issue to you, and you have a plan in place to manage the fix and roll out the fix. So there are a few learnings from the researcher's perspective as well, which Terry and Ron would share.
Okay, thank you, Ravi. And I just got 2 quick tips for bug hunters or white hats. The first one is always use the application. When you face a target, always use it just like a normal user at the first time. No hurry to test, no hurry to like spread your payload everywhere to see if it can trigger somewhere. That is really not helpful for your skills. And especially it is helpful when you, I would look for like authentication, authorization issue or privacy issue or logic issue. It is really helpful when you totally understand the application, understand the target, even more familiar than their own product manager. So that is first tip. And the second is always monitor the update of the target. Like no matter you use some technique to monitor their like static files, like JavaScript files, or you can just simply use RSS reader. It's really helpful. Like you can review the new attack surface at the very first time than everyone else. So that's my tips.
And for my part, I would say that I got lucky this time because I got a great tool helping me for this bug. So my suggestion is keep improving your toolbox. Say in my example, I got lucky. I installed that JSON Web Token Attacker, so it automatically highlighted the request that I would not have been looking at it at all. So always improve your toolbox that fits your need. And the second one, obviously, is make sure to document and screenshot your work. Because I forgot to do that at the time of discovery. That's why I have to use the updated version of JWT, the fixed version. But the reason for researcher to always screenshot and document your finding is that in this way, you can learn it from the past, and also you can always keep evidence and keep up your work for future use. Like you don't know when do you need them. And yep, so this is my final tip. Make sure to document and screenshot your work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. So here are some of the resources that we talked about during our talk here. So you can download Bob Suite from portspeaker.net and read a bit more about Outlook REST APIs from docs.microsoft.com. And you can read the wonderful blog from MSRC if you are interested in developing an incident response plan for your own team and company. And yeah, so that's all from us. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.